there are only two things that moms can do that dads cannot do. They can carry a child for 9 months and give birth, and if they so choose, they can breastfeed. Everything else is non-gendered, even though it's become very gendered. Like,
Yes.
why does mom have to leave to go take the kid to the doctor's appointment? Anybody can sit in a
Yeah.
in a waiting room full of sneezing, strep positive kids. This is not, if you have an older parent, why is it that the mom is the one who's going to have to move her schedule around? Anybody can, take grandma or grandpa to a doctor's appointment. So when you start changing that, it's good for that individual relationship, but I'm sure we'll get into this. When we work with companies on this, we show them why, making these roles non-gendered is actually good for their entire workforce. It's good for their management, and it's ultimately good to build a resilient company where you have a great mix of, men and women in senior roles.
Hi, and welcome to Beyond Empty Nest. I'm your host, Jody Silverman, speaker, mentor, and Chief Dare Officer at Moms Who Dare. Every Thursday, I'll share stories of midlife transformation, happiness tips, and dare you to see the opportunities waiting for you so that you can make this next chapter even better than the last. If you're ready to dare, I'm ready to dare with you. Let's get into today's episode. Welcome to Beyond Empty Nest and to a very special series I'm calling Month of Dad. We spent a lot of time on this show talking about how moms navigate the empty nest, but dads have their own journey too. And this month, we're giving them the mic. Each week in June, I'll be sitting down with a dad who's experienced not just the transition of kids leaving home, but also the midlife shift that often comes with it. We'll talk about what it's really like when your kids no longer need you in the same way, how it impacts fatherhood, marriage, career, personal growth, and the ways these men have dared to step into this next season of life. Today, I'm joined by Paul Sullivan, founder of the Company of Dads, a first of its kind platform creating community for lead dads and pushing for better workplace policies for all working parents. As a lead dad himself, Paul knows firsthand the joys, challenges, and often overlooked realities of stepping into parenting lead role that's still not fully understood. We'll talk about what it really means to be a lead dad, why it matters for families, companies, and communities, and how Paul's own midlife and empty nest transitions have shaped his identity and purpose in this season of life. Whew. Hi,
Woo.
Paul, and welcome to Beyond Empty Nest.
Hi, Jody. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I was excited when a mutual friend introduced us, and I had never heard the term lead dad, but we'll dive into that in a minute.
Mhm.
I always ask my guests, start off by sharing where are you in your parenting fatherhood journey right
I'm right in the middle of it. And when you talk about, my wife and I joke, I don't think we'll ever be empty nesters because our kids are 15, 12, and 7. And we're convinced that, the 15-year-old will go off to college. She'll, do whatever. We live outside of New York City. High probability that she'll get a job working in New York City. She'll be doing this just as the youngest one goes off to college. We'll think, oh, we're empty nesters now, and then I'm sure we'll have grandkids, and so it may never. We're just kind of used to it. It's fine.
I don't want to be the bearer of bad news and the bearer of hard truths, but
Yeah.
they sometimes they come back. Sometimes they go, they come back, they go, they come back. And yet, this is what I'll tell you, because I had a couple years when my son came home from college. He left college to come home, and I did a short video on Instagram about being an empty nester. I posted something, a picture of my
Yeah.
husband and my daughter, who had been out of the house for a while. She texts me, you and dad really are an empty nesters. And I'm like, well, in my mind, I am. So you can be an empty nester when you choose to be an empty nester. So
Well, one of the things we did during COVID, like everybody else who lives in our part of Connecticut, it seems, is we decided to put a pool in. We're like, okay, COVID shut everything down. We're gonna have a pool, and that's been fantastic. But we're pretty sure, like at the very least, when our girls probably get jobs in New York City, at least on the weekends in the
yeah,
summer, they'll be out to visit us and sit at the pool.
that's the beautiful part of it. It'll bring them home. I love
It will.
that. So you're in the messy middle. You're with a 15-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a 7-year-old.
Yeah, so I have high school, middle school, and elementary school, which all of my childhood friends make fun of me for because some of them have, one of them in particular has both of his kids
Yeah.
in college, and he's he just built what he calls his forever home. But being, friends since age 14, I say it's your death home. It's not your forever home. He's like, don't say it
We
that way.
we do that. We have a friend we pick on sometimes because,
Yeah.
well, his youngest is finally going off to college, but we have a good time with him.
Yeah, yeah.
But what I loved about when I was told about you and introduced you and I went on your website, I loved this I had never heard of it. Lead dad, like what a lead dad is. So let's start with and it's funny, I brought it up to a couple people and none of the people I've spoken to have ever heard that expression before. So let's first start by sharing with the audience like what's a lead dad?
Yeah, I'll define it and then I'll tell you how it came about.
Yeah.
So the definition is a lead dad is the go-to parent, whether he works full-time, part-time, or devotes all of his time to his family. That last group is typically called the stay-at-home dad. We don't use that term. The second part is, in many cases, a lead dad is there to support his spouse or partner in whatever their career is. We say many cases because we know 18% of fathers are divorced, widowed, or otherwise single. And then the third component to this is a lead dad is always an ally to working moms and caregivers in general in the workplace. And so that kind of sums up this role. And people say, well, is it about parenting? Is it about supporting your spouse? Is it about balancing work? And the answer to that is yes, because it combines a lot of these. How this term came about was in 2013, I was 5, 6 years into my dream job, which was being a columnist, business columnist at the New York Times. I'd written one book. It did really well. We had two daughters. We had Labradors back then. The poor kids got allergic. The greatest dog of all time, a Labrador. And my wife said, I want to start my own firm. And I said, my wife works in asset management. And I said, 100%, you got to do it. My life is so amazing. You've got to do this for you. And she said, oh, that's great. I'm glad you're so supportive. But what are we going to do with the kids? I'm going to be flat out. I'm going to be busy. And I said, I'll become the lead dad. And we joked about it, and it became a term that we just sort of bounced around. But the truth is, from 2013 to 2020, I was very much an undercover lead dad. I wasn't going around my town waving my hand saying Paul Sullivan lead dad. Is Paul Sullivan, New York Times columnist, Paul Sullivan of XYZ book, or perhaps you heard me speak here, blah, blah, blah. And it was, for two reasons. One, I didn't really see, men like me in my town. I saw most of the caregiving being done by moms or paid caregivers, nannies, au pairs. And then the second reason at work, the New York Times was my dream job. Like, I didn't want to jeopardize it by having them think I wasn't 100% committed to my job. Now, this is my own insecurity. It was my own absurdity because guess what? All of my favorite editors, working moms. Like, they're balancing this stuff, all
Right.
day, every day. But I couldn't, and so it wasn't really until, well, I'm sure we'll get into this later, but it wasn't really until COVID where this whole structure I had created of, kids in school, kids in camp, very much managing my time, leveraging my dad who'd come down a couple days a week. It all fell apart, and that's sort of how we started thinking more, from lead dad to what would become the company of dads.
I love how you define what a lead dad is, that it's not just about taking the lead with the kids and their daily schedule. But, and I love this the first time we spoke, that it's about supporting your partner.
Mhm.
And I love this too. You talk about a topic that I talk about a lot when I talk about mindset. You were making up your own story that if you, as the man, revealed that you were the lead dad at work, it
Oh
might
yeah.
look like you were compromising your ability to do your job when right there in front of you, women do it all the time.
They do it all the time. And we say, now at the company of dads, we say, look, there are only two things that moms can do that dads cannot do. They can carry a child for 9 months and give birth. And if they so choose, they can breastfeed. Everything else is non gendered, even though it's become very gendered.
Yes.
Like, why does mom have to leave to go take the kid to the doctor's appointment? Anybody can sit in a
Yeah.
in a waiting room full of sneezing, strep positive kids. This is not, if you have an older parent, why is it that the mom is the one who's going to have to move her schedule around? Anybody can, take grandma or grandpa to a doctor's appointment. And so when you start changing that, it's good for that individual relationship, but I'm sure we'll get into this. When we work with companies on this, we show them why, making these roles non-gendered is actually good for their entire workforce. It's good for their management, and it's ultimately good to build a resilient company where you have a great mix of, men and women in senior roles.
Yeah, and I do. I do want to get into the community that you've built
Mhm.
and how you started that community and what's going on with it. And I also want to get into how you're really advocating for this within companies to be more accepting of this and supporting the dads who want to come, you know, come out from behind the curtain and say, this
Mhm.
is what I'm doing. I had a question though in my mind that popped into my mind. So when I think it's amazing you were so supportive that your wife wanted to start her own business. Was it hard? Was it difficult for her to let go of some of the reins and some
So
of the lead roles of in the children's lives? I'm curious about that.
so at the time when she did this, we have three daughters now. We had two then, and they were 4 and like 15 or 16 months. And so, yeah, was it difficult? Yeah, it was difficult. But she was, drinking from a fire hose. It was so, full on. The part of the story I left out is, anybody listening to this who works in financial services, when you work in financial services and you say, I have another job or I have an idea to start something different, all that pablum about put the clients first goes out the window. It's like you were immediately terminated. You were immediately cut off from everything. And we kind of suspected that this would happen. And so it's really a scramble in those first weeks to reach out to the clients and say, "Hey, look, this is what's going on." And
Yeah.
again, this is 2013 where um, people needed an office, and so she had to scramble for that. And turns out there was a guy, a friend of mine at the time, who had his own PR firm, and he had extra space, and so she was able, like within a couple weeks, to get an office there, and then it sort of coming together. But I think like anything, like you can run at a super high pace for a finite period of time. And we knew that this would only last for so long. And I think where so many people had problems in COVID is we never knew if it would end. And then we look back like, oh, okay, it was these years here, but you had no idea in the moment, like, holy cow, will we ever see people again? Will this ever happen?
Right.
Whereas what she was doing, we were pretty sure that the first 3, 4, 5, 6 months were
Yeah.
going to be intense, and then after that it will level off, and that's really what
Yeah.
what happened.
When you know that and you have that expectation, it
Right.
makes it makes there's an end in sight. So when did the company of dads form, your community?
22, yeah,
When?
2022.
2022?
Yeah,
So when did you know this was going to be a community? How did it start to form? And how did you find the other dads?
that's a wonderful question, and the honest answer is I didn't know until I knew, because in 2020, like everybody else in the world, life was turned upside down, and both my wife and I were super fortunate in that we could work remotely. We were not, essential workers. What we're doing was interesting, but it wasn't essential. And so we then had three daughters, and so we were all sort of crowded, and it got even sillier. Our former next door neighbor, we were using his condo in South Florida, and we went there before the pandemic, and so we just stayed, and so we stayed in this condo for like 11 weeks, and like, why are we going to come home? And he couldn't come down because he wasn't in the bubble. And so, like, all right, this has got to be better than, suburban New York City. And it was,
Absolutely.
yeah, and it was sunny at least. Um, and it was in that moment, I was like, boy, this is, my wife is super busy, stressed. Like, what's going to happen to the asset management world? Is this going to be the Great Recession, like 2008 all over again? Holy cow, will I have to fire people? And I'm super busy in the other way. Whereas if you're at the New York Times, this is an enormous story, and so it's all hands on deck. You're going, and of our three kids, only one of their schools figured out something that was suitable for remote learning. It was the middle child, and so it was this balance. So I would be at the kitchen table, dining room table in the morning, and helping them out, trying to send emails. She would be in the afternoon, and we'd work like that. And now I was like, wow, this is really hard and untenable. And I'm really stressed out because I'm a guy who likes to plan everything out. I will go to the source of all knowledge in the universe, the definitive source of all knowledge in the universe. It will tell me what to do. And so I went to the Google. And what the Google told me was that there's lots of stuff for moms. All the stuff for parents is really for moms. And the only thing for dads is dads in some form of distress. And the mutual friend who introduced us, he and we play golf together, and I love golf. And there's so many ways to nerd out on golf. But golf is not important. It's fun. Parenthood is super important and occasionally fun. And so I was like, why isn't there something for me? And that really is what sent me down this rabbit hole. And like a journalist, what did I do? I was like, okay, well, maybe I should suck it up. We're in a global pandemic. All right, we'll get through this, but maybe there aren't any other guys like me. And that was the first light bulb moment because U.S. Census, Bureau of Labor Statistics, Pew, they track what people do, they track incomes, they track how people report their relationships, and that was the aha moment because 25 million men in the United States, or a third of all fathers, are lead dads or could be lead dads, and that is being driven by men in their 30s. Men in their 30s want to work and live differently, and that was the quest. And the second part of it is that I knew I couldn't talk to men about this. Like men would lie to me. So if at any point I had said to myself, "Hey, Paul, are you a lead dad?" I'm like, "What are you talking about, man? I'm a New York Times columnist." Because men define ourselves by what we do more
Yes.
than who we are. And so I was like, okay, these guys will all lie to me. I'm going to talk to female executives who have children. That was the only criteria. Female executives, and they had to have children. And I said, "Hi, what do you think of this idea?" And they roughly fell into three buckets. One, that's awesome. My husband was a lead dad. He did XYZ for a career, but he was the lead dad. And he had a really thick skin because all of his buddies made fun of him. They called him Mr. Mom. They called him the house husband, but he didn't care. And it worked out great for us. Okay, that's good. Validation check. Second group, slightly younger. Love my husband. We had so much fun. Then we had kids, and kids are tough. Yeah. But COVID has shown me that my husband doesn't really do anything. Like he thinks he does all these things, but I carry the mental load. And mental load is a term created by this woman named Eve Rodsky, and I carry the mental load for all the things that have to be done. This isn't good. I don't want to divorce him, but he needs some sort of lead dad boot camp. So I said, okay, problem solution, that makes sense. And then, of course, the third group was they could never get it to work out, and these are often very successful women, partners at law firms, consultants, salespeople who traveled a lot, and they got divorced. And they said, good luck. I hope this works. And it was really this final conversation I had with this woman who'd worked at GoDaddy. And her husband was a lead dad. And she said, your moment is now. Like you may eventually write a book about this, but this is summer 21. Like your moment is now. This is a media company and a community platform. And she was right. And then the third part that she didn't mention that I knew needed to be done, and that was, sort of corporate education, workplace education to work with companies. Because I'd given
Yeah.
tons of talks pre-COVID, and I knew pre-COVID, even the best companies in the world, companies that would bring me in because they wanted me to help their company, their employees learn something, or their best clients learn something. So these are companies that were thinking about, growth and development of their employees. They were still making weird mistakes. And that was in, pre 2020, when we all knew that we were supposed to go to work 5 days a week. We're supposed to sit in an office. If we work from home, we were really lying. We were just getting ready to go away for a long weekend. If we were an executive and we said, "Oh, I've decided to leave to spend more time with my family," that means we did a really bad job and we got fired. And all this language changed really quickly. And so it was that in the fall of 21, I went to my editors at the Times, told them my idea. They were super supportive, and I left at the end of 21 and started this in February of 2022.
I love it. I love it. Women, I have my community Moms Who Dare,
Hmm.
and that's for any mom really, but soon to be empty nesters or empty nesters. You don't have to be a full empty nester. And I've had over the years, I have a spin-off
You
membership.
don't do it. You don't do a home inspection, do you? Do you go over
No,
and say,
home
"Okay, let me
inspection.
see here. All right, that bed's got to go. Replace it with a pull-out couch."
You
No.
have way too many human beings in your house to be a mom. Although, funny story, sidebar, since you brought up, we always like to put a little humor. I have a friend years ago, and she called me up, and she's in the Moms Who Dare Facebook group. And she said, "Jody, I have some exciting news." And it was a second marriage for her. She goes, "I'm pregnant." I go, "And you're so kicked out of Moms Who Dare." I'm like, so, but kidding aside, I've had over the years some of the women say, we need something for my husband. I need something for my husband. And I'm like, well, I never did the Google search myself, but I think you're right. Almost every single resource out there leans towards the parents, but really it's the mom. It's always the mom. So I love how you started this. So now you have this community,
Mhm.
a company of dads, and a little bit of what do you do with the community, within the community, and what kind of support or tools or resources do they have? And then I want to get into what exactly, your role is, what you believe, what do you help companies with?
Mhm.
And obviously, you just said like restating it, the language and
Yeah.
reading into it, but I really want to dive a little deeper into those two.
So we'll start with the community side. So
Because
I
community
knew
is so important today.
That's right. And we had to find a way though to meet dads where they were. You couldn't
Yeah.
be prescriptive and people would want, different things at different times. And so of the three things we do, two of them really fall solely in that sort of, retail and anybody can access this. You don't have to work for company XYZ and be part of a program. And that's the media and the community. And so the media is a weekly newsletter, a podcast. We have this feature called the Lead Dad of the Week, and we use that to highlight different men who've stepped into this role, and literally every shape and size, background, religion, race, socioeconomic,
Yep.
what have you. And that's been and that honestly, it runs itself. I just get so many requests to say, hey, I want to be featured. Now it wasn't like that 3 years ago. 3 years ago it
Right.
was like pulling teeth to get guys to come forward, and now they want to say, hey, this is what I do, and this is, but it's been so affirming and so validating because people see guys who look like them, and one of the first, because this is coming to us, out of Philadelphia. One of the first was this guy named Najee Good who won a Super Bowl playing for the Philadelphia Eagles the last time, not the most
Okay.
recent time. He sacked Tom Brady, he intercepted Tom Brady. An amazing story, but he has full custody of his two daughters, and so he is a lead dad, solo lead dad, and an awesome guy. Retired in Jacksonville, that was his last team, but he and I became good friends, and it was so important to have someone like him as part of the community. One, he's a good guy, but two, NFL players are, the apotheosis of masculinity. There's nothing more masculine than a football player. Something like 95 of the top 100 shows every year are NFL football games. People care about the NFL more than any other sport. And so to
Yeah.
have him in this role was super important because it showed like just because you're a lead dad doesn't mean you're not a man or doesn't mean you're not masculine.
Oh,
But then we do other stuff like if you're a new dad, we have a lead dad library. And what is the lead dad library? This is not, the iPhone. I didn't create something. I essentially said, if every other parenting guide is written by moms for moms, why don't I just write a parenting guide by dads for dads? So it's just kind of inverting things slightly different, but people feel, more comfortable. And then the community aspect is every month we do an online meetup and they generally have a theme. This works because guys are all over the country, and then sort of 4 times a year we do an in-person meetup, and that's wonderful. I mean, they're well attended, but it's limited because I live in it's the greater sort of New York
right.
metropolitan area, and so but those online ones are tremendous because you meet guys from all over the country who
Yeah.
want to be part of this because maybe there are lead dads in their community, but how do they approach them or how do they know? And it's so funny. Like certain time, I had this guy from Kansas City, and I said, you know what, you need to meet so and so. I was like, really? He's like, yeah, he was the lead dad of the week, and so it's like playing matchmaker. So then they have a buddy that they can talk about this
I
role
love
with.
that. I love that. I love that. I love hearing how your community works as it, and I know mine works similar but different because women and men are different, but I love
Mhm.
that. And then I know a really big part of what you do, a really big part of the company of dads is going into the workplace, going into companies and talking about workplace policies to change the narrative or open up our minds to a different narrative around men in the workplace who are lead dads. Talk
Yeah.
about that.
It can be summed up in one word, and that's messaging. And whoever it is at the company, we help them with messaging. So what does this look like? Many companies, particularly large companies, have some sort of series of employee resource groups. ERGs, some called BRGs,
Yeah.
all different things. Historically, the parenting ERG, well, it used to be called the working mom ERG, and then they said, "Oh, that's not very inclusive. Let's call it the parenting ERG." Like, okay, well, that sounds better. But the fundamental problem is, as most of them stand today, if 100 people show up, 98 are working moms, and the two guys who show up, they don't need to be there. They're amazing human beings, they're doing all the right stuff. But then you have another 40, 50, 60 guys out there who, may want to be part of that group, could add to that group, but they feel like if they show up, they're going to be called out, not called in. And so some really interesting companies, and one I can speak of because they've spoken publicly about what I've done for them, is the Bank of Montreal. They talk about being inclusive. They want people to come there, and they had me come out, and it was not just moms and dads in the organization, but they opened it up to spouses of their employees and also to vendors. And so it was kind of like a hybrid. Like I was in Chicago and then they streamed it, and it was so remarkable because you once you come together as a group like that, you realize that you have a lot more in common than you do apart. Everybody has to do dentist appointments. Everybody has emergencies. Everybody has to juggle stuff. Everybody has had that moment where they looked at their calendar and both people have to be somewhere on the same night. And so we
Yep.
give them very practical tips. And it's super popular because you come away with it in a 45-minute talk with 15 minutes for questions, and you say, okay, I've learned the following 5 things that I can apply at work and I can apply it at home. And if I'm in one of those roles where I'm working from home a couple days a week and in the office, I can apply it there. That's kind of the second offering we'll do is we'll actually work directly, with managers, and we work with them not on creating their parental leave policy, not on creating their HR policy. They pay people millions of dollars to do that for them. Um, but what we point out is like you've just spent X millions of dollars to X consulting company, and they've created the world's greatest HR plan ever to be seen. But it only takes a handful of managers to say antiquated things to ruin everything you're trying to achieve. So what is that? If you're a woman and you go to your boss, the only right answer, whether it's male or female, the only right answer when you tell your boss that you're pregnant is congratulations. And I talked to someone the other day who said, "Oh yeah, my boss, he said that. I think it was she. No, he said that. He said, yeah, congratulations. I think." I was like, "No, don't say that. Don't say that." But then we also work with companies really are trying hard to have equitable parental leave, and this is such a game changer for individuals because if both the mom and dad get 20 weeks, for the most part they spread it out and they get 40 weeks and they can kind of save a bit on childcare. But it's also great for the companies because it's helping them see like, okay, who's able to work in this new way? Who's able to manage their time in a hybrid way? But it only takes one or two managers to say stuff like, are you really going to take all that time? I mean,
Oh,
what are you going to do? It's vacation. You're getting vacation? When I was in your role, I never took time off.
I know.
And so we help with this, fun because companies love to buy things. They love to say, look, I have just paid XYZ consulting company $5 million and this is the state of the art. Yeah, you bought it, but now you have to implement it.
Yeah.
And we show them how, and again, we're talking about small changes, and these small changes have a big impact. And I say to you, like, I could triple my fee. It's still, you would still, it would still be worthwhile to you because if I save 4 or 5 senior employees from leaving because they don't think that's a culture fit, that more than pays for my fee. That more than pays for it because to replace them, it's not just the cost of like their salary; it's all the institutional knowledge that walks out the door.
Oh, I love that. I love what you do because you do. You have to teach the language just to say congratulations and let it land.
That's it.
Let it
Just
land.
it.
I
There's
love
only one right answer. And
only
not often in life is there only one right answer to the question. That there's only one right answer.
Yeah, it's not congratulations. And are you planning on working up to the end or what do you? No, just let it land. You'll get all the your answers. I love it. It's
People say the
really,
stupidest things. Like, congratulations. How did that happen? What you know how it happened? We all know how this happened. Like, what? How long do I have? Like, you could probably pencil that out too. Like, people wait
right.
about 3 or 4 months to tell you. You could pencil it out. But stupid, yeah.
Yeah. You
But
know what's funny? I think
feel
back.
like on this. I'm sorry, I was trying to like. I say this and I joke about it, but like these are not bad people. These are people. These men. They don't have the language to
Yeah.
respond to what's been presented to them, and so they try to say something, and like I didn't take that time, or ooh, is that vacation? They literally don't have the language to respond. So when you give them the language, most of them will say the right things. And of course, we've all worked for jerks, and so some jerks won't say the right thing, but the
No,
majority of them will say the right thing.
that person's a wrong person. You can't teach a
Yeah.
wrong
Right.
person the right thing. So it's really cynical, but I don't know if you can see all the way at the top. You can't fix stupid. That's why you can't, somebody has to be coachable, trainable, and want to do better to be able to like teach them. So yeah. And you know what? I have nephews. I have a nephew, I have younger brothers, and they all get paternity leave now.
Hmm.
And I'm watching this younger generation negotiate employment contracts. And it's interesting when you brought up the whole badge of honor that I never took a day off. I never took my
Right.
vacation time. And they're negotiating their PTO. Like that's just as important, if not more, than the salary that they're getting. I'm watching it, and at first I'm like, wow. And my husband has that mindset. He has to change. I said, no, you're giving PTO and you're given vacation time. It's your right to take it.
Yeah. And there are a couple things to unpack there. One, companies a couple years ago, like, we'll give you unlimited PTO. It's the worst thing you could ever give somebody because Nobody's going to take 20 weeks.
No.
Most people will barely take 2 weeks. And because you need to model it. If you don't model what you want people to
Right.
do, you can give them any amount. And when you're thinking about your nephews who are negotiating this, what they're really looking for is the culture of the company. The company says, like, we really care about X, whatever. Uh, and then if they really care about that, their policies will match what
Got
they
it.
say. And
I
I had this acquaintance who recently left, I don't know, 12, 13 years. He left a really senior job at Goldman Sachs, a job that a lot of people want, left a really senior job. And he left it not because of the commute, not because of the number of days in the office, certainly not because of the salary. He was highly compensated. He left it because when his mother-in-law got sick, he had to work from home so that his wife could be with her mom and he'd be there to take he zoomed into all the calls. He did, and he's an attorney. He didn't need to be on trading floor. Zoomed in, it worked just as hard. But week one, we support you. We believe family first. Week two, hey, how's it going? Okay. Week three, hey, they're really starting to grumble about when you're gonna come back. By week four, I was like, look, man, you gotta figure something out. You really gotta get back in the office. And that was sort of the impetus to him to sort of break the spell of that company on him. And he went and found another job, paid more money, left. But he never would have, he wasn't looking for more money. Good for him. He's getting paid more money. But he never would have looked for that had the message matched the action. If you say, we really believe in family and whole employees, bring your whole self to work, then you have to back it up with
Yes.
with the action. And I often say, like, some companies should just say, like, you know what? We don't really care about you. We honestly, we just want you to be here and work a lot. And if something happens, we're really sorry, but you got to be here. Like, no company would say that, but like you would self-select a type of person who would just want that role,
It's
and at least
true.
there would be honesty there.
True. Oh, I like that. I don't know. Maybe they should try that. All right. So before we get to wrap it up, is there one piece of advice? Because we're going to ask every woman out there listening to this episode to share it with the men they love and that are important in their lives, whether it's their sons, their nephews, their husbands, their brother-in-laws, anybody. We want you to share this out. What's one piece of advice that you would give to other dads out there that are around being a lead dad or the feeling of not fully, I don't know what I'm trying to say, like letting people know that this is who I am and that I'm enjoying it. Is there a piece of advice you want to leave for dads or even for the women listening?
Yeah, I think women don't need a bald white guy giving any more advice. So I'm gonna leave that one out. But what I would say to dads is be open and honest. We talk about a lot here, and be open and honest, and you'll be surprised at the impact it has. Your friends are not going to make fun of you. They're going to actually, some cases, they're probably going to be envious. And when you go to your managers, they're going to say, like, okay, don't go to your manager and say, like, I'm a lead dad and I want X, Y, and Z. Go to your manager and say, I've been looking at the research at the company dads. I'm a lead dad, and I would like to see if I could work a care shift. It's all explained on our website what a care shift is, how you can still maximize your work synchronously and get other stuff done. Um, and I would say, like, when you go to your manager with a plan and not asking for something, saying, "This is, I believe I can do a good job like this. Could I try this out?" When you're open and honest, they will embrace that, or you're working for the wrong company. And the one thing I'll say is we did this lead dad of the week with this person because half jokingly, kind of dark humor, said, nobody on their deathbed has ever said, I just wish I could have created one more PowerPoint presentation, or I just wish I could have gotten those slides just right. It never happens. And so I talked to this guy who had a big job as a chief technology officer at this telecom company in Canada. And he just worked and worked and worked and worked. And he had two kids and he had a massive heart attack. And he had one of those, we see it on sort of talk shows all the time, like, going back, he sees the light, it's
Yeah.
going, they're trying to revive him. And I said to him, and obviously they revived him, 'cause otherwise we wouldn't be talking. I said to him, like, in that moment, tell me, what did you think about Excel or PowerPoint? He just starts laughing. He's like, "No, I thought about my kids and I thought about my wife and like what I was like, exactly."
And there
And
it
he was an
is.
interesting case because he was such a hard driving person. Afterwards, his boss said to you, "Hey, do you want to step down, have a lesser job?" And he says, "No, it's not the job. It's me. I need to work in a different way. And so he began to delegate more. He began to be more open and honest with like his responsibilities. They ended up having a third child. It was sort of gap between the first two, having a third one. And it completely changed, literally near death experience, completely changed his outlook. But again, nobody has ever looked back literally on their deathbed and thought PowerPoint or Excel. What do I wish I'd done more of?
I love that. So your parting words is I look at this as a dare to be open and honest.
Yep.
And I want to don't you said numerous times throughout the conversation about asking for what you want and negotiating the PTO and is also a way to it's a way to see the culture, unveil the culture of the company. And I hear that don't never be sorry for no. Because if
Right.
the company is revealing who they really are to you, there is something better. Always something better. It's scary in the moment, but there is always something better. Like that story you shared about the gentleman who found a better job with more money. There's always something better.
Right. And like you said, like at least like they said, no, you can't have that time off. You can't do this. Like, okay, well, am I okay with that? Can I live with that? Maybe I can live with it now because I don't have any kids, but I don't think this is a company that I'm going to be with long term. And that's what we tell every single company. Like, when that is your policy, don't expect to retain your top talent as they grow and thrive because they can go someplace else for more money that will understand how they want to work and live, and you will lose that person.
Love it. I've so enjoyed this conversation. I love it. It's going to be so impactful. This whole month has just been amazing. Sitting down and talking to the dads out there. It's definitely going to make a difference. You are making a difference. Thank you for seeing this need for the dads out there and creating the community and all the support that you do. And not even just stopping with the dads, but going into corporate and really helping them change the narrative and learning about the importance of embracing lead dads. Thanks, Paul. I really appreciate this.
Hey, Jody, thank you for having me on, and thank you for daring to have a month of dads. I hope you don't regret it.
No,
I hope
I
you do it
love
again
my
next
month
year.
of dads. My month of dads, I was so excited about it. So thank you everybody for listening and share this episode amongst yourselves as well as sharing it with a man that you love or you care deeply about and share it with your fellow moms so that they have an understanding of what's going on too. And remember that next week we'll be back with another new episode of Beyond Empty Nest. Thanks for being here. And as I always say, dare on. Hey guys, thank you for listening and for daring with me on this midlife journey. If you liked what you've heard, and I really hope you did, give Beyond Empty Nest a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. And be sure to tell your friends to follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now. Until next week, dare on.